Web server attack methodology. In the previous section, uh, we saw how the attacker can perform or how the attacker can compromise a web server security. This section explains how the attacker proceeds towards performing a successful attack on the web server. So there are various steps like information gathering, enumerating web server information, and then vulnerability scanning, um, and so on. So let's look at the information gathering. Information gathering involves collecting information about the targeted company. Attackers search the internet, news group, bulletin boards, etc. for information about the company. Attackers use tools such as whois.net, whoislookup, and query the whois databases to get details such as domain name, IP address, or autonomous system number. After information gathering in the web server attack methodology, we will see web server footprinting or banner grabbing. So in this, the attacker gather valuable system level data such as account details, what is the operating system used, software versions, server names, database schema details. So one of the example is using a telnet a web server to footprint a web server and gather information such as server name, server type, operating systems, and applications running. We can also use tools like Netcraft, HTTP precon. As the name indicates, it performs the HTTP recon and ID serve to perform footprinting. So an example of using Netcraft is given here. So NC minus V Microsoft.com, port number is given as 80, and when we press enter, it will go to the next line. Here we can say get slash http slash 1.0 and press enter twice. So once we enter twice, we have to give telnet moviescope.com 80 and get enter. So it will so using the netcat and telnet, it gives the same kind of information. So we can usually it is the banner grabbing. Similarly, we can perform website mirroring for the footprinting. Website mirroring is a method of copying a website and its content onto other server for offline browsing. With a mirrored website, an attacker can view the detailed structure of the website. Use tools such as nCollector Studio, HT-Track Website Copier, Website Copier Pro, etc. to mirror a website. HT-Track was also used in the initial modules. So information gathering from the robots.txt file. The robot.txt file contains the list of web servers. The robot.txt file contains the list of web server directories and files that the website owner wants to hide from the web crawlers. An attacker can simply request the robots.txt file from the URL and retrieve sensitive information such as the root directory structure and content management system information about the target website. An attacker can also download the robots.txt file of a target website using the wget tool. So enumerating web server information using nmap. So discover virtual domains with host map. So the command is nmap dash dash script host map and host. Example nmap uh, dash p80 dash dash script host map nmap.org. So here host is nmap.org. We are performing enumeration on nmap.org website. So after we can also detect a vulnerable server that uses the trace method. From this command, it seems HTTP trace is a vulnerability and it seems the modern browser prevent this are not possible with modern browsers. So how to use the trace method using nmap is given here. So the command is nmap dash dash script http hyphen trace. So here we are using http hyphen trace as a script. In the previous example, we used the script host map. So in this, we are using http hyphen trace on the port 80 and the local host. So it harvests the email accounts with the http Google email. So http, the script we are using is http hyphen Google hyphen email to harvest the email accounts. And then check if the web server is protected by a web application firewall, WAF or IPS. So to perform this, nmap uh, minus pet hyphen hyphen script http hyphen waf hyphen detect, and then dash dash script dash args is equal to http waf detect URI is equal to test.php dot vulnweb.com slash artists dot php comma http waf detect dot detect body changes, then www.modsecurity.org. Enumerate common web applications using http enum. So nmap dash dash script http enum port 80 and the host name. We can even obtain robots.txt using nmap. We just have to use the script http hyphen robots.txt on a host. So this is the command nmap minus p80 uh, dash dash script http hyphen robots.txt and the host name. So host name or robots.txt we can obtain using wget and also using nmap script http hyphen robots.txt. And then next, finding default credentials of web server. Many web server administrative interfaces are publicly accessible and are in the web root directory. Often these administrative interface credentials are not properly configured and remain set to default. Attackers attempt to identify the running application interface and use the following techniques to identify the default login credentials. Consult the administrative interface document and identify the default passwords. Use Metasploit's built-in database to scan the server. Use online resources like OpenSCZME, cert.net, cirt.net, etc. Attempt password guessing and brute force attacks. So next, finding the default contents of web server. Most web application servers contain default content and functionalities which allows attackers to leverage attacks. Check for the following default contents and functionalities in the web server. Administrator debug and test functionality. Functionalities designed for administrators to debug, diagnose, and test web applications and web servers contain useful configuration information and the runtime state of both the server and its running applications. Hence, these functionalities are the main targets for the attackers. Sample functionality to demonstrate common tasks. Many servers contain various sample scripts and pages designed to demonstrate certain application server functions and application programming interface. Often, web servers fail to secure these scripts from the attackers, and these sample scripts either contain vulnerabilities that can be exploited by attackers or implement functionalities that allow attackers to exploit. So these scripts that are used for demonstration, usually the network administrators or other responsible groups will ignore this. Hence, the attackers target these scripts. These sample are these sample scripts which are used for demonstration purpose. So sample functionality to demonstrate common tasks. Publicly accessible powerful functions. Some web servers include powerful functionalities that are intended for administrative personnel and restricted from public use. However, attackers attempt to exploit such powerful functions to compromise the server and gain access. For example, some application servers allow archives to be deployed over the same HTTP port as that used by the application. Any attacker may use common exploitation frameworks such as Metasploit to perform scanning to identify default passwords, upload backdoors, and gain command shell access to the target server. Server installation manuals. So an attacker attempts to identify server manuals which may contain useful information about configuration and server installation. Accessing this information allows the attacker to prepare an appropriate framework to exploit the installed web server. Use tools like Nikto2 and exploit databases like Security Focus. Finding directory listing of web server. When a web server receives a request for a directory rather than a file, the web server responds to the request in the following ways: return default resource within the directory or return error. Return listing of directory content. Though directory listings do not have significant relevance from a security perspective, they occasionally possess the following vulnerabilities that allow attackers to compromise the web server: improper access control, unintentional access to the web root of servers. In general, after discovering the directory on the web server, the attacker makes a request for that directory and try to access the directory listings. Try to exploit vulnerable web server software that gives access to the directory listings. So this is an example of a directory listing. As you can see, there is a complete list of files and subdirectories within the directory that is listed. This sample screenshot was taken from the Aspen book. So after enumerating, we will go to vulnerability scanning. Use vulnerability scanners such as Accountex vulnerability scanner and 45 web inspect to find hosts, services and vulnerabilities. Accountex spelling ACUNETIX. Accountex web vulnerability scanner. So we can also sniff the network traffic to find any active systems, network services, applications and vulnerabilities present. Test the web server infrastructure for any misconfiguration, outdated content, and vulnerabilities using vulnerability scanner like Accountex web server, uh, Accountex web vulnerability scanners (WVS). Accountex web vulnerability checks web applications for SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and so on. As you can see, Accountex is a GUI tool, and there are many functionalities like scanning for vulnerabilities. uh, the scanned vulnerabilities are listed in the vulnerabilities tab, and we can also generate reports. There is a dashboard also. So in the screenshot um, it is some of the vulnerabilities are listed. As you can see, there are three serious vulnerabilities like blind SQL injection, Microsoft IAS directory enumeration, and also some warnings like unencrypted view state parameter, vulnerable JavaScript library, and there are some informations also in the screenshot. Session hijacking. Okay. So finding exploitable vulnerabilities. Search for web server exploitable vulnerabilities. Finding vulnerabilities is one thing, but finding exploitable vulnerabilities is other thing. So search for web server exploitable vulnerabilities based on the web server OS and software application on exploit sites such as security focus, exploit database, etc. Search for vulnerability based on information gathered in the previous stages using exploit database. Security focus is also similar to exploit database. Exploiting these vulnerabilities allows for the execution of a command or binary on a target machine to gain higher privileges than the existing ones or bypass security mechanisms. Uh, Next is session hijacking. Sniff valid session IDs to gain unauthorized access to the web server to snoop data. Use session hijacking techniques such as session fixation, session sidejacking, cross-site scripting, etc. to capture valid session cookies and IDs. Use tools such as Burpsuit, JHijack, Ettercap, etc. to automate session hijacking. Web server password hacking. Use password cracking techniques such as brute force attack, dictionary attack, and password guessing to crack web server passwords. Use tools such as Hashcat, THC, Hydra, and Encrack, using application server as a proxy. Web servers are occasionally configured to perform functions such as forwarding or reverse HTTP proxy. Web servers with these functions enabled are employed by attackers to perform the following attacks: attacking third-party systems on the internet, connecting to arbitrary hosts on the organization's internal network, connecting back to other services running on the proxy host itself. Attackers use get and connect requests to use vulnerable web services as proxies to connect to and obtain information from target systems through web servers. So next we will see web server attack tools.